Andy, wasn't that long ago we spoke? I don't even know if you say Happy New Year anymore, being that
Mm.
February 1st is on Saturday.
I still think it's appropriate. Happy New Year, Mike.
Appreciate that. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, man.
Who would have thought Trump's second week? I mean, so you knew things were going to accelerate when he took office, but I
Yeah.
don't think you're prepared. At least I wasn't prepared for when you step into the on the freeway how fast things were going. You could talk about what you think might happen, but my God, man, like the first week, like what were you thinking each day as each day went by? Like all
Well,
the
I
events.
think the ironic part of it, Mike, is that we've been accustomed to being gaslighted and you know placated for so long, just thinking that the politician will say this and probably never get it done, and if they do, they'll take their time and it will just kind of fade away into the ether. And I think what's shocking in this cynical world that we live in is that someone actually followed through and did it immediately. And maybe that's why the guy was is a successful businessman. I mean, no screwing around, just get it done. And look, like a pendulum swings from fair value to overvaluation back through fair value to undervaluation, so too did our culture and our identity in this country. And it had gone so far to the other end of absurdity that I think it's called for. And this is the euphoria, if you will, that I think has engulfed the Trump presidency right off the bat, and largely um, justified. The monetary side, I'm not so sure of. In fact, I still am quite doubtful. But in terms of what he is doing to reestablish what it means to be proud to be an American, which doesn't have to be this you know uh, thing where you're bigoted or racist or any of these things. It's a country where everyone has the same shot through equal opportunity, not equality, but equal opportunity, where your merit and your effort and how hard you've worked um, is 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 prioritized over your lifestyle, which is absurd. And you know, looking at what had happened with, in essence, an invasion of this country, 25, 30 million people entering illegally. Try doing that in China and see what happens. Try doing that in another country around the world and see what happens. But if 1% of those people had bad intentions, 30,000 people, how about 5%? And so when you start talking these big numbers, actually, I think I'm wrong on that, aren't I? So yeah, I am wrong on that. That would be 300,000 people would be 1%. Pardon me. Of 30 million people, 1% would be 300,000. And so, okay, so 5%, 1.5 million people in here that have bad intentions. It's a serious deal. And you can see that by what ICE is doing right now, rounding up people that are felons and in some cases very bad people. Um, I'm all about um, people being able to do whatever they want to do. I guess you could call me a libertarian. I'm not someone who has any issue with lifestyle. Um, Whatever you want to do with someone or to yourself, do it. Just we don't have to celebrate it. And when you talk about the loss of our culture in terms of, as I mentioned, the merit versus lifestyle, or the border issues, the election issues, the judicial system issues. These are all things that have gone so far astray that I think it's warranted, and it's being noticed because I think a lot of people almost figured that the world had changed so dramatically it would never go back to anything that we even recognized. And over the last 4 years, I didn't recognize to a large degree. In fact, that's why I moved out of Minnesota, a place that I swore I never would, a place I was always proud to be from. But they lost their mind when I lived there during the George Floyd riots, and it was it was an easy decision to move to Florida. The quality of life is exponentially better. I hope that things go back to the way they once were, because the state of Minnesota was a great place to grow up and a great place to raise a family. But it too lost its identity over the last half a dozen years. So when I look at these changes that Trump has made, I think they're phenomenal, and I think most people do too. And all he is doing is restoring the virtues and the principles and the ideals that this country was founded upon. You know, hard work, um, you know, keep your nose clean, and be, you know, equal opportunity, equal application of the law. All of these things just seem to be thrown out the window over the last several years. So yeah, I am not surprised, and I think it will open other people's eyes, even on the left side, who will be pleasantly shocked. I mean, if these people have kids, I don't know how you don't want your children to grow up in a country that, you know, bases your success and your potential and your opportunities based upon your effort and how hard you work to get there. That more than anything to me is something that I'm excited about. But you know, we should talk about what's going on with the financial side, because I don't think he'll have as easy of a road to hoe with regards to fiscal and monetary policy and the massive indebtedness that we find ourselves in.
So that's where I think people's expectations need to be way, way lowered down, right? Because he is only one guy, and you know, I don't want to talk out of turn here, but you can't just come in and move levers around and flick light switches and just erase the financial headwinds that are, I believe, are coming at us. It's amazing though. I still, you know, 2008, I didn't think we'd get through that, and we did. And here we are in 2025, and we're still limping along, limping along, limping along. I mean, just in the last couple of days, what's transpired, I mean, even today with China. Well, let me go back a second. Last week with the Larry Ellison at Oracle and the $500 billion investment on the energy side. You know, he keeps talking about crypto. And now, you know, China with this move today, with their AI. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very scary proposition. First of all, when you realize the degree to which Apple and Nvidia and the tech industry has supported a stock market that has horrible breadth, not bad breath, but horrible breadth, BREDTH, because you have 7 stocks holding up the entire market. You look at the Russell 2000 as an example, or the Wilshire 5000, and these stocks represent on a much broader level the economy. Most are underwater. These stocks have been holding up the market, and this new DeepSeek that came out, made by China, immediately you see Nvidia sell off by 18%. That's a scary deal, and it goes to show how dangerous it is to have such a inverted pyramid almost. You have just a handful of stocks holding up the broader indices. And when you talk about this kind of technology, it's expanding rapidly. To think that the United States will be the only country who can be at the forefront of this, I think, was a wake-up call here with this DeepSeek. I don't know a ton about it. I know that the NASDAQ 100 fell about almost 5%. The S&P was down a few percent, as were all of the tech stocks, Microsoft and Palantir and you know, all of the like Google, all the alphabet stocks. They were all down when this came out. This is just one. Who's to say there won't be a whole lot more? So, yeah, I think that people should understand that profit's not a 4-letter word, and especially as it pertains to technology that is rapidly changing and rapidly developing. And, you know, this is just one country coming out and showing us what they've done, and who knows how much more you have. I mean, look at the Google Willow chip, for example. Just as a side note, you know, you talk about this digital world we live in, and this Google Willow chip. You should check that out. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what it is, but this chip will do in 5 minutes what, a whole bunch of the world's fastest supercomputers would take 10 septillion years. And I didn't even know what septillion was until I read it. Must be like 1,000 trillion rather, sorry. But technology is rapidly expanding so fast that an indice or a market that's being held up primarily by tech stocks is very dangerous because it masks the rot within the economy that has had to deal with almost 2 years worth of inflation and higher interest rates and a slowing economy. So yeah, it's an interesting development, one that I think we'll see much more of as the year rolls by.
Do you, and I'm paraphrasing here too, because a few months back you had the whole carryover with Japan, right? Where there was this sense of panic, and then they were able to stabilize it. However they're able to do that. They're so creative, these people. But I was watching, some posts on X, some handles last night, as they were talking about this AI out of China, and they said, well, is this a psyop or some type of distraction for another carryover? Am I explaining that right?
What do you mean by a carryover? I'm sorry.
The whole Japanese, the carryover that happened in Japan.
Oh, the carry trade.
Carry trade. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard that angle, but the Japanese carry trade is part of the reason you've seen such massive valuations as well, where people would borrow in yen at basically next to zero in terms of a rate. And take that and buy U.S. treasuries or U.S. stocks. And that works really great until the yen starts to go way up in value or the dollar starts to go way down in value. And, it's that blowing up of the carry trade is significant and still has the potential to be much more significant. I haven't heard that angle. Namely because this is coming out of China, but, psyops and misdirection, black swans, these are all things that are real, as much as people hate to deal with the reality that there is a very fine line between reality and conspiracy these days. Many of the things that I've talked about through the years, I was accused of being conspiratorial, only then to be vindicated and apologized to as it pertains to gold manipulation. I said for years, based upon COMEX data and the bank participation report data, that JP Morgan was manipulating the market for years. And I was told by Doug Casey at a conference, the traders can never keep their mouth shut long enough. There is no such thing as gold manipulation, only to have JP Morgan 2 years ago pay a $920 million fine for doing just that, the largest fine the Justice Department ever handed out. And a lot of the things that we were told over the last 4 years that were conspiratorial, we find out now are true. Whether it be Hunter's laptop or the Wuhan lab or all of these things that if you would have said Hunter Biden, or if you would have said, coronavirus, you would have had your channel flagged, and they would not allow that video to be posted. You get 3 of those, they deplatform you. And here we find out many of them are true. And, I think there is a fine line between conspiracy and reality. I mean, look at, I guess we'll find out when Trump releases the JFK and the RFK and the MLK reports, that maybe it wasn't just a lone gunman. And these kinds of things. And lo and behold, I was reading today that Oswald was actually a CIA operative and he was on their payroll. And they found it in records in Europe. It was dug up after many of them were destroyed here in the United States. I mean, I read that on Fox today. So a lot of this stuff that we think might be conspiratorial really isn't. So when you talk about a PSYOP, nothing surprises me in a world where things are very over leveraged and undercapitalized and changing by the moment, very much in flux. And don't forget, you have a deep state that's very angry right now and backed into a corner. Um, I give him a lot of credit for standing up to these people, but if you think they just go away into the evening nicely, I would argue that's probably not really the case. So there are a lot of things, potential black swans and psyops and misdirections. And when you talk about, you know, that type of a scenario, look, you have $7 trillion plus in money markets, record. You have record amount of people in the equity markets in seven stocks, and you have a bunch of money in crypto. And the crypto market is tied incestuously right now to the treasury market, which people aren't talking about enough. Um, it's very interesting when you see an administration that has been pushing crypto and realize that countries around the world like Japan and China and Saudi and India and all these countries are dumping treasuries. Who's buying it to finance our debt? And then you realize the stable coins, USDC, US dollar coin by Goldman Sachs, or USDT by Treasury, Tether, by Tether, USDT by Tether, and others, the new one by XRP or Ripple Labs, they made another stable coin. These are all coins that are one-to-one valued at $1. The majority of their assets, their holdings, what is backing these are U.S. Treasuries, and then dollars after that. And so you have this new crypto universe that is incestuously tied to the legacy market that people are trying to get out of. There's a lot of craziness, and there are a lot of things that I think, people would be surprised to know the truth. Maybe we find it out someday, but as far as that particular question is concerned, I haven't heard it, but would surprise me.
The thing with the crypto, because you heard one of Trump's executive orders was the banning of CBDCs, but then again, crediting following some of these handles on X, we're saying, well, the privatization of the coins, that's the real risk.
Well, the way I think that the back door to that is to issue stable coins, and for that reason alone, in that the stable coin market would, in essence, if you are the gateway to the crypto universe through stable coins, which are invested almost entirely in U.S. Treasuries and then in dollars, it's a way to kind of backdoor not only the surveillance, but also the on-ramp and off-ramp into the crypto sphere, and at the same time support the legacy system, which you want to talk about psyops, that's your psyop for you, where, yeah, no CBDC, but it's fun. I mean, I even interviewed Judy Shelton the other day, and Judy advocates, she was Trump's nominee in his first administration for head of the Federal Reserve, wasn't appointed. She will most likely be on the board of governors this term. She advocates for 50-year treasuries backed by gold, redeemable in gold at the end of the term. And she said to me, and I would like to see stable coins issued against these treasuries. So when you do that and have the backing, now what would that stablecoin be backed by? U.S. Treasuries. So you issue stablecoins or the on-ramp and off-ramp of the crypto sphere. So if, let's say you sell Ethereum to buy Bitcoin, you don't sell your Ethereum and go into U.S. dollars. You sell it and go into like a Tether, a stablecoin. That when you do that, they buy treasuries to create that coin. So you've created a multi-billion-dollar buyer for treasuries, just as the rest of the world is selling them. There's always something behind it. It's not as simple as one would think. Trump said Bitcoin was a scam a few years ago. Now he's embraced it. So, look, man, I just think I think things are rapidly changing. And if I were to be completely honest, I would say there's as good of a chance that he was brought here, like selected, not elected. Look, they bring him up against a lame duck challenger. He comes and fights against all of the craziness that we talked about a few minutes ago and does it, inspires confidence on both sides of the aisle, brings in a team that is very tech oriented. already has mentioned the digital ID that you'll need for election integrity. You just check it out when you have some spare time. Who's behind the digital ID 2020 and the patents? You'll see it's Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, and then let's see if I can real quick give you the name of I always forget the name. There is also a massive group that is in all about vaccines, and it's not one of the Modernas or that. It's like a 4 or 5 letter acronym, SARNA or something like that. I should know that by now, but anyways, I forgot what is the exact name of it. But these are all companies that have patents on the ID 2020, where they want to commingle your passport information, your birth certificate, your health records, your financial information, all on this digital ID. Well, Trump has already said he'll roll it out for election integrity. Gentleman who I interviewed, Francis Hunt, said he would do that. And he said he was selected, these are his words, to bring in the surveillance state and a team that would do so. And making everything digital. But who knows? Who knows what is real and what is not real? And I think, Mike, to me, the most important thing is that if people don't question everything now after what we've seen the last 4 years, truly, then we've learned nothing. And if you think that misdirection and psyops are just black and white, well, if you really want to do a psyop, you allow what happened over the last 4 years to happen. So people say, what the hell has happened to my country? What's happened to my country? And then you bring in the savior on the white horse that fixes everything just like that, tries to bring in Doge and says, look, Doge isn't going to work out the way we hope. They're already said they're backing off of 2 trillion and said, well, hopefully we can get 1 trillion. But everyone's going to need to pay their fair share. We need to reset the system. We need to go through a reset. What better person to usher in a reset than Donald Trump, who is the master of reorganization and bankruptcy? One that would, for the first several months of his term, inspire patriotism and unity, and do the best he can to straighten out the ship. Now, this is what Francis said to me. I will tell you, I hadn't looked at things that way, but after I spoke with him, it's opened my eyes into possibilities. And here's that fine line. I said, you mean to tell me that he's selected and there are people pulling the strings? He said, oh, yeah, absolutely. They're pulling the strings. You'll never know who they are. He's beholden to them as well, is more or less what they said. And as painful as it was to contemplate that, who's to say he's wrong after what we've witnessed? Who would have ever thought we could live through the things that we've lived through? So I guess you take the good with the bad. But I think the moral of the story is we are moving towards a digital system, period. And when you talk about facial recognition and this digital ID that now you have to vote in the next election, there's cameras everywhere and biometrics everywhere. It's the beginning of a social credit score. Doesn't mean we'll go that way, no. But it certainly means that we are moving into a digital universe. And if we're not going to do a CBDC because no one wants it, well, what better way to do it than through something like the stablecoin industry, which is attracting more and more people into crypto and controlling the on-ramp and the off-ramp and supporting the bond market. So, yeah, I think the bottom line is not everything is as it seems. And you have to question everything. That would be my advice to anyone listening to this.
I watched that interview with you and Francis Hunt, and it was very good, by the way. But also, I want to talk about that. But I also let me add something else too that people might not be aware of. That Tether made a $775 million investment into Rumble.
Right.
Interesting,
right? I did not know that. I did not know that.
I figured you did. Yeah, it was in December. And I had to look it up really quick to remember the dollar amount, but I knew it was a large investment. It was a $775 million strategic investment Rumble received from Tether.
Right, and so now you get a positive slant on Tether, and they were in trouble at some point, to my recollection, by the Justice Department. I don't know, that just kind of went away, right? Well, and now their balance sheet is predominantly U.S. Treasuries. So you have now a buyer for Treasuries as the central banks sell off. And what happens if there is a bond market sell-off? What happens if there is a crypto sell-off? What happens to the bond market and vice versa? It's something that is very, I think, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's just something that seems a little shaky to me. But if you wanted to reset the system, you incentivize the world to no longer want to predominantly trade in dollars because here again, Trump is talking about 100% tariffs. Those aren't tariffs. Those are sanctions that are masquerading as the word tariff. A tariff is something you impose to protect your domestic manufacturing and not to say if you don't do this, then. And you can see the pushback, like in Colombia already, the 50% tariff on anything going back into the United States now that they're putting on, or the other way around. If they want to import our coffee, 50% tariff. And so, you're creating currency wars and you're creating, this is what brought the BRICS together to begin with, was this coercion and the sanctioning, and I call it bullying. If you don't do this, then, if you're going to try and build a common currency, well, you're going to pay 100% tariff. Really? Well, who does that really hurt in the end? And it crystallizes people's countries' resolve to find a back door and not be completely reliant on the U.S. because if you don't adhere to their policy, well, then you're going to be sanctioned. And worse yet, maybe your assets stolen, frozen and stolen, the way we took $5 billion of Russian treasuries and used it to fund the Ukraine. So these are all reasons that I think it would be far more beneficial for President Trump to focus on the olive branch rather than the stick. But to a large degree, he doesn't seem to be doing that.
Well, and so coming back to your interview with Francis, maybe it's, you look, I'm a skeptic on everything these days. I was wrong on the election. I have not felt the optimism or the sense of hope prior to Trump taking office. I'm like you. I enjoyed what I saw last week. I love seeing the liberals in tears. I love seeing that mayor get scolded. I mean, I don't want to lie to you, Andy. I thought it was great.
I thought it was good. And worse than that mayor was the knucklehead sitting to her right, the guy who was challenging him on FEMA.
It's speaking so highly of it and saying,
yeah, I mean, like, know your place, man. You're sitting on national TV talking to the president of the United States and you want to show the world how smart you are. The whole liberal agenda with that. I mean, and it hits so close to home. My assistant's family, although they're very successful family, but they lost a very expensive home in Palisades, gone, nothing left. And it's and then they're one of the few that have insurance, and they're being told, well, we'll pay you your money, but you have to build right here. They were trying to sell the house; it was for sale, and now they have to rebuild it. And heaven knows how long it will take for them to get the permits and get it built again, and how long it takes in dealing with the insurance companies. But the whole thing is a nightmare, and a lot of it was created by this left-leaning, Gavin Newsom-led
communist, Andy.
Agenda.
Communists that hate this country. That mayor hates this country. She hates it. And you can't tell me some of the people there secretly were happy that those people lost their homes.
Well,
in my opinion,
there are rumors that BlackRock was going to making cash offers to people to buy up all that prime real estate. Any way you look at it here, again, fine line between conspiracy and reality. Why were the fire hydrants empty? Why were the reservoirs empty? Why did they choose this little fish where there's supposedly all sorts of them all over other places, but there's one little fish that they misdirect all the water into the Pacific Ocean instead of into the reservoirs in California where they need it, where every single year there's so much potential for fire that the insurance companies all are pulling out and pulled out in June and July prior to this fire, because it's like living in Florida with the hurricane risk. The fire risk is that high. The whole thing is just, you can't make it up. Just like Newsom signing a law saying that it's illegal to ask people for voter identification. It's too stupid to be stupid. That's what I've said for a long time. And saying their agenda was to do this, was to bring down the U.S. for whatever reason. If not, it was just too stupid to be stupid. You see only 700 people. Only 700 people tried to cross the border the other day when they were getting 70,000, it seemed like, every day. Prior to this, they could have stopped it. They didn't want to. So yeah, I do think to your question, there probably were people that were happy And there are people that are more or less, I don't know, it's treasonous on many of these people, I think, have acted in a treasonous manner. And I try and say this stuff coming from the perspective of a guy who comes from nothing, Mike. And I mean, I come from nothing and I worked hard to get to where I am and for 35 years. So I am not an elitist rich guy. I'm someone who still works 16, 18 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, nonstop. And if you look on YouTube for a moment, you'll know that I'm being honest. And I still run a company and have a family and have a life, sort of.
Sort
So
of,
I love
Andy,
the
sort
opportunities
of.
this country has given me, and I thank God every day I was born in America. I do. And that's why I'm glad Trump is here. But I will tell you, in my gut and in my heart, um, I am very cautiously optimistic upon how this all plays out. Not saying he is the Trojan horse. I'm not saying that. Maybe he really is genuine, trying to destroy the deep state. But they've controlled the world for such a long period of time that I don't think they go down easy. I mean, just ask yourself, who the hell's been running the country for the past year? I mean, it certainly wasn't Grandpa Joe. Who's been making these decisions to accelerate things in Syria or in the Ukraine? Who's been making these decisions? And we've given, 200+ billion to the Ukraine while the infrastructure of this country has crumbled and we've descended into chaos. You see the poor folks in Lahaina, in Palestine, Ohio, in North Carolina. I mean, how about some of that money going there? And the whole thing is just, it's absurd to me. That's why I think there is this euphoria surrounding Trump because of stepping away from a moment from bizarro world and getting the United States back on track. But that would be, from a psyop standpoint, the perfect time when you gather or create unity after a good period of disunity. That's not even a word. Whatever. No unification. You know what I'm trying to say? What better way than to somehow have an event that creates a reset? And who's better to usher in that new system than Trump? You look at the banking system. It's incredibly over leveraged and undercapitalized. We just saw the first bank failure in the United States in 2025 in Chicago, or in Illinois the other day. We had the first bail-in Lindsay, Oklahoma in October. No one knows about it. No one talks about it, yet they were bailed in and half of the uninsured deposits are gone. That's just one area. You have rates that are rising and all of the banks and insurance companies that are fully loaded with treasuries betting that won't happen again. How hard would it be to blow up a bank like Bank of America? One big one that Warren Buffett is divesting of and has been shorting gold and silver, and not a good bank. Trump was just chastising them publicly the other night at the World Economic Forum. Blow up that bank and let people in this country understand what bail-in legislation is, and bang, it's all gone. And the rush to pull people's money out of the banks would bring down the entire system just like that. And it would accelerate rates to go to the moon, which would bring down the stocks, the bonds, the real estate, the insurance companies, the remainder of the banks. You reset the system and usher in whatever that new system is. Now, I would have thought it would have been a CBDC. It's not, at least by his executive order. But the point of it is that there has to be some form of a reset. Everyone focuses on 37 trillion in debt. Well, how about the nearly 200 trillion in unfunded liabilities? Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government and military pensions. Medicare Part B is 99 trillion underfunded. Part D, 77 or 22 trillion. Social Security, almost 77 trillion. Those alone are 160 trillion, and a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. You put rates higher, and the whole thing just implodes.
Plus, Andy, though, how many people do you have that are withdrawing from the system as we speak, that have continued to withdraw themselves from corporate America, from the healthcare system, the paying taxes? People have realized that this whole system is a grift. And so they're just slowly removing it. How many young people out of high school are looking at their future with not a bright outlook, knowing that they can't afford a house, right? College is, especially for, in my opinion, you have to say in my opinion for everything right now, right? But for young men, is not the best way. And cars. I mean, who can buy a car right now? Who can afford that? Who can?
And insurance, I mean, insurance is out of control here in Florida, car insurance included. Even in my old home state of Minnesota, over the last 4 years, they had the highest increase in carjacking in Little Minnesota, which in the country, which was, Little House on the Prairie and Mary Tyler Moore, man. And all of a sudden, and insurance rates have gone up higher in the state of Minnesota than anywhere. And that's largely because they have the largest population of Somali Muslims in the country, in the world, outside of Mogadishu. In Minneapolis, they have an area called Little Mogadishu, and a lot of them are uninsured. And that was part of Governor Walz's deal. You don't have to be a citizen to get your driver's license. Really? That's interesting. Well, now they have the highest insurance rates, or the highest increase in America, or pretty dang close to it. You're right. The costs are crazy. And that's one of the things about the CP lie, where they tell us inflation's only 3%. You ask John Williams of shadowstats.com, go to his site. He'll tell you add an 8 to that. Inflation's really 11%. So they lie to us about the metrics of inflation. The other day I went to the grocery store and it was just going to be a quick deal. It was over $100. When I was 15 years old, 1985, I worked as a bag boy at a grocery store. And when someone would come with $100 in their shopping cart, it was like, oh man, this is going to be like 12, 18 bags. And now $100 is a couple boxes of strawberries and 2 steaks or whatever. And, my father graduated college in 1963, was married to my mother at that point. And his first job out of college was $6,500 a year. He said, we lived comfortably. So I asked Judy Shelton, who in the right mind decided to make the inflation target 2%? You know what her answer was? It was Janet Yellen and her husband. I forgot her husband's name, but it was his thesis. And somehow that's what their ambition is, to strive for 2%. They've never been there even in good times, basically. And that's why they lie about the metrics. But even at 2% in 10 years, you've lost 20% of your purchasing power. And so, this whole thing is bad. You're right. And you do have a generation of people that aren't having kids either, because it's too expensive. And at the same time, we're watching our population decrease. And this was their whole rationale of bringing in all the people here illegally. I'm all for immigration. That's what this country's about, but do it the right way. A guy across the street from me, there was a party for him last year from Montreal. He took the classes and did everything. He did the right way. He has a business here. He assimilates. And he was so excited when he got his green card, or he became a citizen. And how disrespectful. My nephew, who comes from nothing and paid his way through college at a very high-priced college, played baseball at St. Thomas University in Minnesota, and worked his butt off to pay off his student loan debt. Well, what Biden did by forgiving the student loan, it's immoral. It's why is it okay for someone to not honor their word and others can honor their word, and that's just okay? This is about this nonsense of equality. No, it's equal opportunity. No one gave Matt, my nephew, anything but an opportunity, and he did it. And he rose in a profession and paid off all of his debt. He was so furious that Biden would do that. By the way, as pathetic as him doing that, now Trump trying to reverse it. Do you know what the largest asset is of the U.S. government?
No.
Well, take a guess. What are we talking about? Student debt is the largest asset of the United States government. If you Google it, what is the largest asset of the U.S. government? It's about $1.6 trillion. It is an asset, a receivable and an asset, which you can't bankrupt yourself out of. They have roughly $5 trillion in assets. This isn't the country, but the government has about $5 trillion in assets. Number one is student debt. Number two is military. And number three is land, national parks and stuff. So you think about a country that's 200 trillion in debt with 5 trillion in assets, the largest being the debt of our children. And you start to wonder, is a reset in order? Well, I don't know. You tell me. It certainly seems that way. And how do you pay off a debt in a country that's lost its manufacturing? And Trump wants to bring the manufacturing back. What does that do? All the manufacturing left because employment was so much cheaper, right? We got addicted to buying cheap things from China. All of a sudden, you bring all those people back. First of all, you have to upgrade the manufacturing facilities. You have to train people, and then those people that you've just trained, they demand a whole lot more money than do the workers around the world, and benefits and all this stuff. Welcome to the Great Depression. I mean, it would take years before that became equitable, and you would have to more or less not be a globalist world. Close our borders, which I'm okay with, mind you. Close the borders, close all your 700 military bases, bring all these people home, protect our country, have them build our infrastructure, put them to work instead of paying them to guard military bases around the world. How about pay them to rebuild and replenish this country's infrastructure and protect our borders and be a manufacturing engine for this country? Now, is that going to happen? No, but you try to do it any other way, prices on everything that you have been buying, first of all, things will become impossible to get, and prices will go through the roof because you're trying to onshore manufacturing at a much higher cost level. That's why they left in the first place. So I'm not saying that this is great, but these are the challenges, and this is why I think a reset is in order. And for a long time, I've talked about incentivizing a reset by weaponizing the dollar in the treasury market, to make all of these countries, and inflating the hell out of your currency in fiscal irresponsibility to the nth degree. This is like a 16-year-old with mom and dad's credit card on a buying spree. Go buy whatever you want. That's the way we've acted. And just the first 2 months of the fiscal calendar, which were the last 2 months of current presidency, they incurred more debt in the first 2 months than in the history of the U.S. Treasury first 2 months. And they went more in debt, like, I forgot the number. I looked at it last week. I don't know, $900 billion, almost $1 trillion. It took to 2009 to do that for a whole year. We did it in 2 months. The level of fiscal irresponsibility is just ridiculous. And the country's in trouble financially, and all of these things he wants to do, I think they're noble, but much harder to do. And the consequences of doing it, either way, I liken it to the Shawshank Redemption. And we may have talked about this the first time, where you have 2 miles worth of crap to crawl through to get to the other side. Now, there is another side, but it won't be easy. And that's what happens when you become the largest debtor nation in the world. Most of it accumulated at the lowest interest rates ever in history. And as those rates rise, what happens to the debt? What happens to the commercial real estate? You talked about, all of these people pulling out of the system. Well, how about all of these people working from home? And the massive amount of commercial real estate that over $1 trillion is due to reset this year, and over $1.5 trillion next year at much higher rates, and no one's working in office buildings anymore. What happens? All of these things are potentially trigger points for a reset or for a collapsing of the system that ushers one in.
They're still building apartments here in Phoenix, all over the place, Andy. And you know what? I don't even know. I was just reading last night about rents collapsing, prices decreasing, but yet there's still, right by me, North Scottsdale, Optima, it's a I don't think it's a billion, multi-million-dollar complex. Man, they are cranking this thing out right now. And
well, people still need to live somewhere. They can't afford a house, so they'll be renting apartments. You wonder, the Klaus Schwab, you'll owe nothing and be happy. I'm not saying that's where we're going. Hopefully he is not part of this, World Bank.
Let me point something out to you, Andy, cutting you off here for a second, because you brought something up with Klaus Schwab, and I've been talking about this on other episodes, and I want to hear your thoughts. I feel like with Elon and the big tech that's behind Trump right now, this is the WEF 2.0, right? Where they look at this and say, all right, we are the ones building these financial instruments. We don't need Klaus Schwab. We don't need any of those people. They need us. So let's just get rid of them. They will be the casualty behind it. We have inserted ourselves in the Trump MAGA movement. We live here in the United States. So this is the new World Economic Forum. The Tech Brothers, the Palantirs, the Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, Bezos, Zuckerberg, they all got in line for this election. They didn't have an epiphany and said, oh, I found God. I was wrong. Am I crazy by saying that theory to you?
No. Or maybe they were just saving their asses because, I don't know about Bezos, but you could argue what Zuckerberg, I mean, I don't know how much heat they put on him. He admitted that they came and twisted his arm. But these things are treasonous, I mean, that's election interference, amongst other things. I don't know. I mean, is that really the case? Look what China just did with DeepSeek. Is it really that way? Maybe it is. I mean, we don't manufacture microchips. They're all made in Singapore and in
Taiwan.
Taiwan. Thank you. Are we? Maybe of innovation, intelligence, but certainly not manufacturing. And all the rare earths that are needed to build this stuff, the majority is found in the Eurasian continent and Indonesia, primarily the largest nickel producer in the world. They just became a formal member of the BRICS. Their president, Widodo, has called for an OPEC-style cartel for rare earths. China has a stranglehold on the refining of rare earths. They refined almost 100% for the last 3 years in a row of all the world's rare earths. So, yes, maybe that's why he wants Greenland, right? Greenland. I don't know. Maybe that's because maybe there's a whole bunch of rare earths there. You listen to what Lindsey Graham had to say, and it made me nauseous talking about the Ukraine. And he said this war is all about resources. That the Ukraine is not only the breadbasket of Europe, but they have massive stockpiles of rare earths, and we can't let Russia get them. He said this on Sean Hannity, and he said whether people want to say it or not, this is what it's all about. So they come in, the deep state, whatever, the military industrial complex, they help destroy the country. Who gets all the contracts to rebuild it? Oh yeah, it's BlackRock and the deep state, and then exploit their rare earths. It's the same thing we did in Iraq. We went there under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. Sorry, we didn't find any. We're still there 21 years later, and sanctioning their banks and for trading with Iran to buy liquid natural gas, and we sanction them. You can't do that. And so they've taken all dollars out of circulation in Iraq. There are no green dollars in any bank. They made trading in them illegal. If you own a business and try to, you'll be put in jail. And they're in the process of kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. So this is kind of the pattern. And you look at what happened in Syria. It's about oil and the pipeline that Assad didn't want to let go through Syria, which would, this whole thing is all about resources, and there's more to it than meets the eye. So to your point, maybe, I don't know. And that's again what Francis said, is that his team would inspire a lot of this confidence as well, the Elon Musks. And I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying we must question everything nowadays. And if not, we learn nothing over the last 4 years, not a damn thing.
And J.D. Vance, where did he come from? Who put him into this position?
Not more so than that. Where'd he go? It's like Elon's the vice president. You rarely hear from J.D. Vance. He's an afterthought. You hear of Elon every single day. I don't know. And again, that's what I mean. And in politics, nothing is coincidental at all. I don't know.
Do you
I think it's a crazy time. And I think that a lot of this nationalism and a lot of this feeling of we're going to do this is exactly what you would need before a reset, because now you have a united front to rise from the ashes. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that how the hell do you dig your way out of a hole that is exponentially increasing. Everyone focuses on the 37 trillion in debt. That ignores the elephant in the room, the 175 or 80 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security in particular. And what are you going to do? He won't touch those. How do you overhaul that system? Does that mean you don't get Social Security if you've made money but contributed to it your entire life? Is that fair? I mean, the whole thing is fraught with possibilities. And I hate to even sound tinfoil hat, but so many of these things you have to just ask yourself: is it coincidence, or is there something bigger behind it? And again, I voted for President Trump. I'm thrilled he's here, but to think that everything he wants to do will just be, roses and chocolates, I think are a big mistake. I think it's going to be very bumpy, and maybe more so than people think, as they are euphorically optimistic about what's going on. And I guess only time will tell. I hope I'm wrong. I got 3 kids, man, and my youngest is 17. So I'm not voting for chaos or reset or massive inflation or depression, whatever it is. In my mind, you have to reset the system somehow. You'll never, ever pay off this debt. You'll never fix things without resetting the system. And this is what happens when you mess with Mother Nature the way we did with interest rates for such a long period of time. By suppressing interest rates and making money easy, you distort asset prices and create misallocations of capital and resources. You build extra buildings for your business because you're expanding, only to find no one's in businesses anymore. And asset prices go parabolic in a low interest rate environment. What's your house worth at 3%? What's it worth at 6? What's it worth at 9? What's it worth at 12? What's it worth at 20? Who's to say? And here you have the Fed lowering the federal funds rate by 100 basis points, 1% over a couple of meetings, and the 10-year Treasury went up commensurate. That's the world, or the bond market, saying, no, we're not going to take your duration debt without more return. It's just, we're not going to do it. And it's the 10-year Treasury that everything is based off of: the mortgages and the credit cards and the leases and the loans. And so, I just think people need to keep their eyes open and question things. And as far as precious metals are concerned, to me, it's not an investment, it's wealth. We haven't talked about it at all because I think it's the why that matters, not the what. The why is more important, but just so people know, for me, precious metals are not a way to get rich or wealthy. They are wealth, and they've outlasted and outlived everything the world's ever thrown at it. 2 world wars and German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, and here we are 5,000 years after it was written. I don't know how many hundreds of times in the Bible, and the central banks are buying more than they ever have. They're not doing that with Bitcoin. They've doubled down over the last 2 months, the 12-month moving average, doubled it, and repatriating it. Over 40 countries have repatriated their gold from the New York Fed and the Bank of England, where they used to keep it to give access to the COMEX in New York and the LBMA in London. And here Bank of India just brought back 100 metric tons of gold that they've held there since 1991. They have virtually no gold at the LBMA anymore, at the Bank of England. So, and why was it reclassified the only other tier 1 asset? And when you talk about gold being revalued, which I do believe it will be, it's held in every central bank balance sheet in what's called the gold revaluation account. Can't make it up. That is the name of it. Roosevelt, over my shoulder, that's what he did. He confiscated gold and paid everyone $20.56 for the $20 gold coin. And 56 cents in 1933 was probably worth $10 or something today, if not more. I mean, a carton of eggs was probably a nickel back then. But anyways, he devalued the dollar immediately by 40%. Gold went up to $35. Bang, just like that. Judy Shelton believes that gold will be revalued. And why not if she's pegging it to a new system? Cynthia Loomis, the senator from Wyoming, at the Bitcoin conference, after Trump spoke, wants to revalue the gold held by the Fed on behalf of the Treasury to fund the strategic Bitcoin account. The central banker out of the Netherlands, the head of the Dutch National Bank, screaming for the last 2 years, we need to revalue gold to offset our liabilities. Who would it benefit? Well, the central banks. They're the ones buying it all and repatriating it. And you want to revalue gold and do it uniformly. Look at the amount of gold all the European countries have imported over the last few years, and as it relates to their GDP, a relation of GDP to gold holdings, it's almost identical across the whole European Union. It's if they're all preparing for a gold revaluation and peg it to a new system, because this system has run its course, and we've distorted it by suppressing interest rates where asset prices are out of control. And you can see that with what's happening to the real estate market. There's stalemate. No one wants to sell. The prices are too high, and they don't want to sell because they have a 3% or a 4% mortgage. Can't move lateral at a 7 or 8% mortgage. So there's a lot of distortions that will work their way out. People will have to just deal with the fact interest rates are higher and probably aren't going lower, um, where you will start to see things happen. We're not there yet, but to me, you own gold because the system is in flux, and the biggest money in the world, the central banks who know the playbook, who revalued gold as the world's only other tier one asset, are buying it hand over fist and using the suppression, the leverage suppression on COMEX and the LBMA, naked shorts, to run cover for their acquisition and draining of the world's exchanges, which they're doing. Um, it's one of these deals that until it happens, it will be hard to see it unless you spend as much time as I do searching for it. But in retrospect, it will be very obvious. And it's just that most people refuse to think of gold because it's not sexy. And yet over the last 25 years, it's doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury, and it's outpaced the S&P 500 with dividends reinvested, just barely. But here it is, that non-interest bearing rock sitting in your attic outpaced the performance of the S&P with reinvested dividends. It's 9.9%, and the S&P 9.6. So it continues to move higher, and it's ignored. It was up 30% this year. It's ignored. My mentor, Richard Russell, said if you make 7% a year, you're a rock star. So it quadrupled what he would consider a rock star. And it isn't sexy enough because people have become accustomed to instant gratification not being quick enough. You need to make 100% in a month, in your meme coin or in your Nvidia or whatever. And at the same time as all of that euphoria has happened, you have the central banks voraciously accumulating and taking possession of gold, pulling it out of the way of the West. You just have to wonder, where does this all go? I don't know, but I hope these kinds of discussions encourage people to think outside the box a little bit.
Do you think we are? I feel like we're already in a surveillance state in terms of the control, right? Everything is done on the phone. All the apps are done on the phone. People are doing facial recognition at airports now. I mean, it's not like the days of when you and I were growing up and we had to write things down, the old-fashioned checking account. So to me, they've already been prepared for some digital platform control.
Well, it is. And that's when the whole concept of quantum computing and this Google Willow chip come into play. And I would urge people to Google the Google Willow chip and read about it. And, if this chip, which is this big, can do what the world's fastest supercomputers can do in 10 septillion years, number I'd never even heard of, what does that mean for blockchain or passwords or anything that's numeric? It means it's dead in the water. I mean, dead in the water. So where do we go? We go back to paper and pens, and I don't know. These are things that in a digital world, I think, need to be. I mean, JP Morgan as it is, I think they spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion a year on IT security. Literally that kind of money, maybe even more than that. I remember the number. I think it's even more than that. In fact, now let's just find out real quick. I bet I can find out. That's now before quantum computing. What happens when the Google Willow chip becomes common? JP Morgan spend on IT security per year. See if I can figure it out real quick. Okay, I was off by a little bit. JP Morgan Chase has significantly increased its investment in cybersecurity over the years. As of 2019, the firm allocated approximately 600 million annually to cybersecurity efforts. By 2024, the investment had risen substantially, with reports indicating that JP Morgan was spending 15 billion annually on a technology, a portion of which is dedicated to cybersecurity. So, you know, what does that do to the small businesses who want to remain, keep their information private when you have this kind of technology that renders your normal gateway security a joke? These are the things that all of these things people need to think about. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we could go down this rabbit hole with a bottle of scotch and talk all night long. And I'm telling you, we would have a fun conversation. But I hope, if nothing else, you know, uh, people question everything. That's just the most important thing. Just don't be the sheep following the other sheep to slaughter. And you talk about psyops again. I don't want to anger the people about Trump because I'm all for him, but it's just too easy, maybe, huh? And maybe a lot of it is genuine, but maybe there's the back door. So just keep an eye open, and in a world of decreasing privacy and the surveillance state, gold will give you a little bit of extra privacy in a world where that's decreasing rapidly. So I don't know. It's as the Chinese curse says, Mike, may you live in interesting times, brother. And these are indeed anything but dull and interesting for sure.
Last question. You got time for one more?
I got to be out of here in about 3, 4 minutes. I have to meet someone for I guess you would say, happy hour drink to discuss business, but I got time for one more quick one.
Sports franchises. We touched on this last time. We didn't get to it. You're a lover of sports. I'm a lover of sports, especially from our childhood. It always seems like these teams, these franchises, always go up in value, right? They sell for a higher amount. Do you ever see a time where we've had real estate bubbles, we've had tech bubbles burst? Do you ever see that with sports, professional sports, where
Yeah,
the
I
value
mean,
of a
for
team will
sure.
drop?
It's gross how much money these people make. I mean, you get it because the owners make it all otherwise. But, like I was saying to you offline, that's a picture of Joe Mauer right there, Minnesota. And I've loved baseball my whole life. You can see all my baseball cards over there that I have on the wall, and my baseballs and the football helmet. I mean, I've always sports defined my life, my whole life. Um, and but I find it repugnant. Like, take 3 kids and your wife to a ball game. You're going to spend $1,000 easily. That's not practical any longer. It's become too expensive, and the average family can't enjoy it.
What about the TV revenue, though, side, or now all the
That's what's
streaming?
all about, the TV revenue. As I was saying to you before, Kirby Puckett in 1988, after they won the World Series, signed the largest contract in sports history, 3 million a year. And now with TV revenue, um, if you look at, I did it with Joe Burrow, the quarterback for the Bengals. The contract that he signed last year was the largest. Someone just signed a larger one. I don't know, Dak Prescott or someone. But the year after he signed it, he got hurt. If we took the numbers the year before, it was like 600 or so passes. I'm doing this from memory. He was making $85,000 per pass attempt. 85, 85, 85. I mean, it's just insane the amount of money they're making. So yes, not only have these people are they disconnected from the public, lots of them. It's becoming too expensive, and so yeah, it will all be about TV revenue and corporate suites, which it pretty much is as is, unless you're very wealthy and can afford to go, which is tragic. I remember being a kid and going to some sort of a convention with my dad, and meeting a bunch of the Minnesota Vikings. This would have been in 76, maybe 77. And these guys, these are Hall of Fame purple people eaters, they were called, that in the off season sold insurance or, worked other jobs. They didn't make enough money to live like rock stars. And they would sit there and shake your hand, and, you know, they were more common folk who played the game for the love of it. not the case anymore. So yes, I do think that that certainly could happen. And um, to your point earlier offline, especially in the NBA, well, I agree. The contracts, the seat prices are just they're just obnoxious, and you know, um, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's kind of emblematic of where we are as a society, where you know, teachers and doctors and really important people are barely scraping by, and you got athletes making 50 million a year. Well, that's not everyone, but even a middle relief guy who has a 4.5 ERA and 6 wins last year, he'll sign a contract for 5-6 million a year. And Kirby signed it as the best player in baseball in 1988 for 3 million a year, which was a record. So it's inflation for you. That's getting out of hand for you. And yeah, wouldn't surprise me. Just like the United States government, it's irresponsible and it's different, but the same level of irresponsibility, or at least you can draw a parallel at some point. You get a boycott. We don't want your treasuries. We don't want your dollars. And we don't want to watch your NBA games anymore. It's just gotten too far out of control. So interesting thought experiment for sure. We'll have to do that when we're together with that scotch and see how it all plays out in our mind's eye. But yeah, you're right.
Next
It's
time
not as
too.
fun anymore.
Next time we got to talk about college too and how that's gotten out of hand as well. But that's a whole nother conversation. So
Well, I got lots to say on that too. So I look forward to that. And
where can people find you, Andy?
info at milesfranklin.com is the best way to check out our prices. We hold a price list close to the vest for many reasons, which we can discuss another time. But to say that our prices will be as good or better than just about anywhere in the country, we've never had a customer complaint ever in 35 years. Very proud of that. Info at milesfranklin.com. I do have my own growing YouTube channel, which has grown to over 32,000, I think, since June. We started it, and it's little by little on YouTube. Google my name on YouTube. There's a gazillion. I've done over almost 5,000 YouTubes in the past 4.5 years. There's probably 3 times that many out there. I don't know who put them out there, where they came from. They will splice like an interview I'll do with you, and we'll end up somewhere else. I have no idea who did it. They do it to monetize their channel. So they can find me if they look. It's not real hard, but to find out about what we do, any questions that you have here, anything you've heard here, or prices, info at milesfranklin.com would be the best way to get in touch with us, and no obligation. If you do want to be contacted, put your phone number down, check your spam, because we're good at emailing you right back. A lot of times anything that comes from a corporate server will get flagged by the spam. So if you haven't heard from us within a half a day, check your spam. And other than that, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Mike. I look forward to doing it again, picking up where we left off. We seem to have a lot to talk about. Either that or I just don't shut up.
I love our conversations, Andy. And thanks as always. I look forward to continuing to follow along and more conversations ahead in 25.
You got it, brother. All the best to you. Happy, healthy to you and your family and everyone else out there in 2025. I think it's going to be a heck of an interesting year. Let's just hope that Chinese curse doesn't factor into what interesting truly is. But I will be looking forward to that. And until then, we'll chat again.
Mic drop.